It's October 12th, Patron Saint's Day in Brazil. Brazilians have come from across the country to Aparecida to celebrate the Catholic holiday. These devotees can be seen walking across the bridge to the Basilica on their knees to pay promise and give thanks. Aparecida is home to Our Lady of Aparecida, the second largest basilica in the world, but the town is extra crowded this year as the president himself is attending Mass. Bolsonaro's supporters see him not just as the more religious candidate, but as a spiritual warrior in the fight of good against evil.
A esquerda no Brasil, ela está totalmente anti-religião. E se temos parte da população, grande maioria da população, que é a favor da religião, que tem sua religião, 70% do povo brasileiro é cristão. E tem esta minoria que depredam igrejas, que falam mal dos santos e dos cristãos, que apoiam um ladrão, não podem ser de Deus. Então, essa sim é uma guerra espiritual também.
It's this binary of good versus evil that leads many scholars to call Bolsonaro a populist.
As conservative religious people, I think that messages that tell them that their conservative values are under threat are definitely going to be messages that would have a high chance of resonating, and saying, oh, well, they're being stupid or silly to believe those messages that suggest that their values aren't really their values.
Rebecca Abers is a professor of political science at the University of Brasilia. Her research focuses on the relationship between populism and denialism in Bolsonaro's response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And so conspiracy theories fit well with populism because they connect to this idea of somebody else is trying to ruin us, trying to do bad to us, an outsider, the Chinese who invented the virus, or those actors, those scientists who are denying that we have a cure. So there's this, it's connected a lot to this defining our adversaries as conspirators as part of a giant sort of plan to attack this honest, good definition of the people, this us.
Abers sees the relationship between Bolsonaro and his base as a complex, interdependent process of socialization.
So what I mean that in the sense that I really feel uncomfortable when people just look at this as simple information manipulation. I think there's things going on that are connected to how people develop their social identities.
While Bolsonaro's base is important to his re-election, he also relies on the support of those who voted for other candidates in the first turn.
It's not for those that decided to vote for Bolsonaro, neither for Lula. I can respect both.
Paulo Ganime is a congressman from Rio de Janeiro. He declared his support for Bolsonaro after his party's candidate failed to advance to the second round of voting.
If you know that Bolsonaro is a little bit better than Lula, it can be 1% better than Lula, you should vote.
Okay, but the tweet doesn't just say that it's going to be a 1% difference between Bolsonaro and Lula. It says you won't be able to sleep, you won't be able to speak to the government.
That's the second part of the Twitter. My first objective is to say, you are responsible for the result anyway.
Yes.
That's the main goal of this tweet.
Okay.
The second one is to compare both. Yes, you're right. In Brazil, Lula said many times that he will control press. It's not what I'm saying, it's what he's saying. Then you will not be able to communicate, to complain against him if he will control the press. That's not what Paulo is saying, it's what Lula is saying. And even now, he went to the Electoral Court to request to remove contents that say true about him. Can you imagine if he's the president?
Both sides have been taking advantage of the newly empowered Electoral Court, or TSE, whose decisions fall upon one man, Judge Alexandre de Moraes. As reported by the New York Times, quote, Brazil has become a test case in a swelling global debate over how far to go in fighting false and misleading reports, end quote. The court ordered the takedown of a video in which Bolsonaro discusses eating the human flesh of an indigenous person. The court also ordered the removal of a video linking Bolsonaro's opponent, Lula, to corruption. Bolsonaro actually made the statements in question, and Lula was, in fact, imprisoned under corruption charges, although the Supreme Court later reversed this decision.
Does Brazil have First Amendment rights in the same way that the U.S. does?
No, I don't think so, especially because the Supreme Court is acting in the way of censorship. I mean, for the first time, you ask newspapers, and imagine if this happened in the United States, Supreme Court called New York Times and said, are you going to publish this feature? That doesn't exist. And that's exactly what's happening in Brazil. Once you censor Graças do Povo or a newspaper or antagonist, that's censorship. And that's something that has not existed in Brazil since the dictatorship times. So I really, that this shows the damage of populism in democratic institutions.
Felipe D'Avila was the presidential candidate for Partido Novo and is the author of The Blessings of Democracy. He garnered less than 1% of the vote in the first turn. While Novo Party members like Ganime have endorsed Bolsonaro, D'Avila himself says he will not endorse either candidate.
Because I believe that Bolsonaro and Lula are two faces of populism. Now, what I'm endorsing now is attacking Lula more than Bolsonaro, because nobody has any illusion about Bolsonaro. You know that electing Bolsonaro, what you get is a president. But you're creating what I call self-deceiving prophecy, believing that Lula now is the savior of democracy in Brazil.
Even though D'Avila hasn't endorsed either candidate, he and other members of his party have been sharply critical of João Amoedo, the previous leader of Partido Novo, for his endorsement of Lula.
He's been endorsing Lula, saying that Lula is better for the democracy. Well, okay, show me the evidence. I mean, the point is, if you want to make a choice between the lesser evil, do it. But don't create an excuse or a moral justification that's not based on data and facts. Assume that I want to support Lula because I like Lula. I want to support Bolsonaro because I like Bolsonaro. That's okay. But don't tell me this guy will save democracy. This guy is the guy to make Brazil be trusted in the world again. Come on. That's ridiculous.
In D'Avila's view, Lula is as much of a populist as Bolsonaro, with the fact that it's coming from the left rather than the right making little difference. But if Lula is a populist, his populism does have different characteristics. Abers offers this explanation.
There is a phenomenon of Lula being an individual who mobilizes a great deal of emotional attachment. You know, he is a leader, a kind of charismatic leader that has an incredible amount of support as an individual. And if he, in the last election, he wasn't able to run because he was in jail and the PT lost. This election, he is running and, it's a completely different political situation. Although we don't know whether he'll win or not, it's still, he gives the left much more support. So there is a phenomenon there, which many people call Lulismo. In the old days, Latin American populism was a lot about that kind of leader. So Brazil had Getúlio Vargas, Argentina had Perón. There's kind of these sort of historical populist leaders who had this a great deal of personal power, and that was part of their source of power. And in Brazil, there still is this. It seems like individuals have a lot of political power. Bolsonaro and Lula are both individuals who mobilize passions and way beyond any kind of party relations.
Bolsonaro has continuously compared Lula to left-wing populist dictators in South America.
Vamos falar dos seus amigos? Daniel Ortega? Ortega é seu amigo, não é?
Vou falar.
E Ortega é seu amigo?
Falar.
É seu amigo Ortega?
Faz a pergunta.
É, ele te cumprimentou quando tu foi pro segundo turno aqui.
Faz a pergunta.
Ele lá.
Unlike in the US, where associations with communism or socialism are political suicide, members of the left do not shy away from these symbols.
Eu acho que Cuba é um exemplo de resistência, um exemplo dentro do mundo globalizado. E acho que Cuba é um exemplo de resistência, de persistência num mundo diferente também.
If you ask Lula's supporters what's important to them, they do not tend to prioritize religion.
Para mim, particularmente, é indiferente, porque ele agrega os pobres. Ele, de fato, ele olha pela família. Então, nesse sentido, ele é cristão. Ele defende as pessoas, ele defende o ser humano, ele defende o evangelho de Jesus Cristo.
They instead prioritize economic issues.
I support Lula because I'm a person very compromised in the democratization of the food, of the access of good food, quality food. And he was the president who brought Brazil out of the hunger map. And so I believe that once you put hunger in this as a priority, you can really change and you can really put an end to it. And he did it.
Bella Gil is a social media influencer and chef. She is also the daughter of Brazilian musician Gilberto Gil.
It was the Zero Hunger Project that was created and how can I say, developed by José Graziano da Silva and a team, a big team. José Graziano was, after that, director of FAO.
It's these economic policies that make Lula so popular among his base.
Quero Lula presidente para mudar de novo o Brasil, para mudar de novo a vida das pessoas, para distribuir renda de maneira melhor novamente, para o Brasil ser feliz de novo.
These supporters put little stock in the corruption charges surrounding Lula, instead pointing to the fact that the judge, Moro, who is responsible for Lula's trial, was later hired into Bolsonaro's government.
I think that it's important to know a little bit of the history and to know a little bit of the political game so people can understand how he got into jail, why he got into jail, because actually he's a person and he's a politician who believes and who wants to work for the people. And he believes in the people. And he wants to make Brazil really a place that it's good to live, that has food justice, that has, food for everyone. And that's not what, the people in power want. So was the way that they had to stop him, actually.
For Lula's supporters, it's Bolsonaro who is the threat to democracy and social freedoms.
Well, he connected the present with the past. He connected the present with, let's say, our fascist past. We have a fascist past. At the 30s, Brazil was one of the most powerful fascist party outside Europe. It's a party with 1,002,000 members. The Integralist Party. This was the name. And he was able to make this connection again. I think two most important things. The first one is this idea that citizenship, it's the right to have a gun. Then you organize the society with this idea that violence is something normal. If you have, okay, we are in a very violent society, but when the government said to you, but if you are a citizen, you should have a gun. You can imagine what this implies. This is one of the first one of the things. And the second one, it's actually everything concerned restrictions about human rights, about gay rights, about women rights. It's now on the agenda in Brazil. And he was able to prove that.
Lula is pulling ahead of Bolsonaro and has received the endorsement of the two candidates who received the most votes after him and Bolsonaro. But even if Lula wins the election, he will face the heavily conservative Congress that was elected during the first term, making it difficult to push through the same kind of economic reforms that he did during his first two terms.
Subscribe to Colburn Classroom and be on the lookout for new videos.